Hello students, welcome to another video. Today in this video we'll be trying to get an idea about what are futures contract or what are futures, which are generally used by this name. It is a derivative instrument which derives its value from the underlying asset. It means the value of a futures contract depends on the price movement of the underlying asset. If the prices go favorable, the futures contract value will be higher, and if the prices are unfavorable in the market of the underlying assets, then the prices of the future contract will be lesser. So they are financial derivative contracts. Now, these types of contracts are done between two parties, that the buyer and the seller, and it creates an obligation on both the parties to buy or sell a particular, quantity of an asset, or a commodity or a security at a predetermined price at a particular location. So these types of contracts are obligatory, means both the parties are obliged or liable to execute such contracts, and it cannot be withdrawn. The quantity and quality of such contracts are standardized, and they're also traded on futures exchange. That's why trading on futures contract is very smooth, because it's regulated, it's standardized, and it's done through futures exchange. It creates an obligation on the buyer, that the buyer has to purchase or buy the specified asset at the specified time and the specified price. And it also creates an obligation on the part of the seller to sell that particular asset in the agreed quantity, in the agreed quality, and agreed time and place. So these are the basic things that are important in futures contract. It allows an investor actually to speculate the prices of the underlying asset, and make the profits out of the price movements on that assets. Such contracts are basically entered with the two prime objectives. The first one is to hedge the price movements and inherent losses that might occur due to such price movements. And such type of hedging exercises done by the producers or manufacturers of the produces. So commodity market, where the prices are likely to move or fluctuate, or they are very volatile. So in that market, producers or manufacturers or the purchasers, they want to predetermine their prices of the product, so that they can ward off any losses arising due to market fluctuations. That was the hedging purpose. And the second one is just for speculative trading. So many investors don't actually interested in taking delivery or possession of a particular commodity or an asset. They're just interested in to make profit out of the price movement of the uh, underlying asset. So they are actually day trading future contracts, which are done in the futures market. And at the opening of the day, the prices are at a particular point, and the close of the day, the prices at a particular point in the exchange market. And the difference between these two prices create that either profit or loss, for which the investors trade in this futures contract. Futures are available on various categories of assets, like stock, then exchange indices, currencies, or any commodity. We can understand the concept of futures contract with the help of an example. Suppose there is a farmer who wants to cultivate potatoes in the coming months, and he wants to hedge the prices, so that if the prices of potatoes fluctuate or they are volatile, then he might get a reasonable amount on his produce by selling them. So what he does, he finds a buyer or a businessman who's interested in purchasing the potatoes, and makes a futures contract with him. So the farmer will agree in this futures contract to sell a particular quantity of potatoes to that businessman at a particular or predetermined prices, and in the same way the seller will agree to buy the potatoes in a particular quantity at a particular price, whatever be the market price at that time. So irrespective of the market prices, they will purchase and buy the potatoes at the agreed price. And this type of contract between the producers and the businessmen are futures contract, and these contracts are specifically done for hedging the losses. For example, you can take that the farmer wants to produce or rather sell 10 quintals of potatoes to the businessman, and the rate that would be agreed is we can say 1000 per quintal. So the contract price in this case will be 10 quintals into 1000 per quintal rate. So the it will be 1000 into 10, which is equal to 10,000. So the contract price is 10,000, and out of this 10,000, a margin money which may range from 2 to 5 or any percentage of the contract price will be paid by the farmer, by the businessman to the farmer. So that is the margin money required for this contract. Now this contract creates a binding on both the parties, that is farmer as well as the businessman. The businessman is bound to purchase the potatoes from the farmers at 1000 per quintal rate at the given time period. And similarly, there is a binding on the farmer as well, to sell those potatoes to the businessman at the agreed price, that is 1000 per quintal, irrespective of whatever be the market price at the time of the transaction. We can understand in this transaction, the concept of payoff means what will be the benefit or loss to both the parties. Suppose at the time of the transaction, the market prices of the potatoes move up to 1200 per quintal. So now, in this situation, when the market price of the potatoes or the commodity has grown or risen to a level which is more than the agreed price, that is in this case the agreed price is 1000 and the market price is 1200. So who is the loser and who is the gainer in this situation? In this situation, the businessman will gain, because the market price of the potatoes are 1200 per quintals, but due to the futures contract, the businessman will have to pay only 1000 per quintal to the farmer, and so per quintal he'll be gaining rupees 200. So it is a win-win situation for the businessman who had agreed to buy the potatoes from the farmer. On the other hand, the farmer will be losing 200 per quintal, because as per the agreement, he has to sell the potatoes to the businessman at rupees 1000 per quintal, but the market price have grown up and they are 1200. So if the farmer would have not entered into this agreement, then he would have sold his produce or potatoes in the market at 1200. But due to the agreement, futures agreement, he is now liable to sell his potatoes at rupees 1000 per quintal. So he'll be losing 200 per quintal. So there is an equal amount of loss and gain for both the parties. So the businessman is gaining rupees 200 per quintal. On the same hand, the farmer is losing rupees 200 per quintal. So, but due to the futures contract, there is an obligation on both the farmer as well as the businessman. This was futures agreement or contract with the purpose to hedge the losses which might arise due to price fluctuations. Now there are, as we've discussed earlier, that there are people or investors who are not interested in taking possession of the commodities or assets. They're just bothered about the price movements and want to make the benefits out of those price movements. So in that case, the motive is not hedging, but it is speculative. That is betting the prices of the uh, uh, particular asset or commodity and turn around the profit. Now, let's take an example, like a day trader buys a oil futures contract. So at the time that this contract was entered, the price was rupees 4.2. Okay, so if it was 4.2 and at the end of the day the prices have risen. So if it rose to 4.6, Then point 0.4 means will be the per unit they will be gaining point 0.4. So in this situation, the buyer of the futures, oil futures contract, will be gaining because the prices have risen, and he can even if the market price is higher at 4.6, he will be able to purchase, or he's enabled to purchase due to the futures contract, those futures at rupees 4.2. So he'll be gaining point 0.4. In the same way, if we reverse this situation from the point of view of the seller, means the seller of the futures contract, then due to the increase in the prices, the seller will be losing because he had agreed to sell you know to at 4.2, but since the he has to sell at 4.6 due to the rise in the prices. So in the futures contract, if the prices of the underlying asset increases, the buyer who is taking the long short, means to hold the asset, you know will be gaining, and the vice versa, means the seller will be losing. And if the prices fall short, or they decline, or they come down, then the buyer who are taking long short will be losers, and the sellers who have taken the short position will be the gainers. So this is the mechanism that is used in futures trading. One important concept is M2M concept or mechanism that is applied in futures contract. What is M2M? It is marked to market mechanism. It means actually that the margin, there's a margin account of the investors. That means a minimum level of margin has to be maintained. Initial amount of margin is deposited, and there's a minimum level which has to be maintained. And the profits and gains due to the fluctuations in the prices of futures, means futures are also fluctuating with the fluctuations in the underlying assets value. So due to the changes in the value of the underlying assets, futures value keep on changing constantly during the period of contract. And these ups and downs in the prices of the futures create profits and losses, and these profits and losses arising due to the changes in the futures price is accounted for, or credited or debited on daily basis to the investor's margin account. So if there is a profit, the margin account would be credited. If there is a loss, the margin account would be debited, and the minimum balance of the margin amount has to be maintained by the investor. So this mechanism of daily adjusting the profits and losses arising due to the fluctuations in the futures contract is mark to market concept, and this is applied in and at the end of the expiration date, the net gain, or the net loss in during the entire period in this contract due to the underlying asset is calculated. And if it is a gain, the net, if it is a net gain, it is credited to the investor's account. If it is a net loss, it is debited to the investor's margin account. So this is the mechanism of working of a futures contract, and it's very good option for investors who are preferring to take a risk and earn money, and also for those who want to hedge or secure prices for the producers, for the products or goods that they are producing. When we you know analyze the what futures or futures contracts are, then we get to know about some of the important characteristics of features. So if we focus on the features, then the first important feature of the future market is that it is traded on exchange. So futures contracts are traded on futures exchange, and they are very much organized forum or platform where physical location is designated, and all the trading are done in a very organized manner through these exchanges. Then number two is the requirement of margin, as we've discussed, that at the start or at the onset of futures contract, margin money is to be paid by the seller to the buyer. So who is the person who will be purchasing, the person who is purchasing will actually pay the margin money to the supplier. Now the third one is the standardization of futures. We also discussed it earlier that the quantity, the quality, the location, everything is specified and standardized, and it's all done through exchanges. So futures contracts are very much standardized, and it includes everything about the date, the time, the quantity, the quality of the assets that has to be delivered or traded. Then regulation, it is well regulated by the state, so all futures contracts are regulated by the state. It is provided, means the futures exchange provide a ready and liquid market for the futures contract. So any investor can anytime make an entry or exit into the futures contract and make profit out of it. So it's not necessary for an investor to hold on with that contract for long. It may be traded on daily basis. Then there is a clearinghouse. The exchange, that is futures exchange, acts as a clearinghouse for the for such contracts. It means it acts as a buyer to the seller of the futures, and it acts as a seller to the buyer of the futures contract. So it is the intermediary, and actually the one contract is then converted into two contracts. Means the contract between the buyer and seller is converted into two contracts. The contract between the buyer and the exchange, that is the clearinghouse, and the contract between the seller and the uh, clearinghouse. And this way the entire trading is done in futures contract. So I hope with this video you'll be able to know the basic concepts of futures trading and how futures trading is done in the futures exchange market. Thank you for now.